roar of those engines and you saw it take off?
Oh yes, unforgettable experience. I've been a passionate advocate for Concorde ever since the project was first launched, and here was the realization of a dream. Any maiden flight is exciting, but the maiden flight in France and then at Filton, one was acutely aware of the historic significance of what we were watching in the conclusion of the long period of development flying before the first passenger was carried. Here was the dawn of a new era, and today, sadly, we are marking the end of that era. And I had to say there's more fuss today than there was on the first day of flight.
And John Hutchinson, if we look at it, you can see there Concorde making its progress towards London. So roughly what altitude would you say they're at there?
Well, it's difficult to say from those pictures, but I suspect you're right. I think they probably are getting clearance to fly in at a rather lower altitude than normal, so probably somewhere around 1,500 feet, I would guess at. And all I know is that that chap's going to be concentrating very hard on making a most immaculate approach and a most immaculate touchdown. We'll get our score charts out.
Yeah, how easy will it be for him to put out of his mind the emotion of the moment, the historical significance of the moment, and just be concentrating on, right, am I doing everything that I would always do in the run-up to a landing?
I can only compare it with my last flight on Concorde when I retired, and I just felt I did not want to walk away from that aeroplane. That lovely airplane that meant so much to me over 15 years, having done a sort of bit of a shot-down type of arrival. Unfortunately, I did a very smooth landing, and I'm sure that's the way all these three chaps will want to end their Concorde careers.
How difficult as a plane is it to land?
It's a very easy airplane to land. It's settled, that great delta wing compresses the air between the runway surface and the wing, and it sort of settles into that ground cushion effect. The trick is to actually land very smoothly.
Raymond Baxter, we talk about you, and me growing up, I remember you, of course, as the Tomorrow's World presenter. What do you feel? It seems like we're going back to yesterday's world today, yes, by saying that the supersonic age has ended.
Well, yes, I share your emotions exactly. I think what we are seeing today is a national wake. It's a cross between a celebration and mourning. And I am mourning in the sense of grief, you know what I mean. My hope, my profound hope, is that Concorde will be seen flying again. And quite frankly, I am not certain why she's being taken out of service. The aeroplane has operated impeccably all those years and is today, as we can see, operating impeccably, forecasting the arrival at the end of the runway to the nearest second. And I remember so clearly when it started, and there was a certain amount of suspense, even though André Turcard, the French test pilot, and Brian Trubshaw had done it on the simulator, they could never be sure how it would actually handle.
And we're just getting these wonderful pictures there from the helicopter. And I think another Concorde was coming the other way, so I don't know whether they're on some kind of pattern of coming in sort of some kind of formation. But there's the very wide shot that we're showing you of the Concorde. Now we can go in tighter as the plane comes in, and these are photos of these pictures are coming to you live from our helicopter that we've put up over London to get these marvellous images of Concorde against a sort of autumn cloud cover. That has, luckily, it's been cold on the ground today and a little windy, but it has been a very fine day with very good visibility, and that's why we're able to bring you these fabulous images. John Hutchinson, let me bring you in as well there, because I saw you were nodding vigorously to when Raymond Baxter was saying, this is a premature end.
I absolutely was nodding vigorously. I agree with that completely. The airplane should not, in my view, be ending its career today. It's got at least 8 or 10 years life left in it. And it just saddens me. I hope maybe a consortium, or Sir Richard Branson, or a consortium involving Sir Richard Branson, maybe we'll get together and enable one to fly on as a heritage airplane. That would be magnificent.
Now, the fact that the landing gear is already down, does that suggest that it is very close to landing?
That'll mean he's about 5 miles or so out from the runway threshold, roughly speaking.
Right. And so then, a matter of minutes to go before it's due to touchdown.
Yep.
Let me just stay with you on the whole question of whether it is viable or non-viable. Isn't the problem that it was technologically spectacular, aesthetically wonderful, but commercially a disaster?
Well, people say it was commercially a disaster. I don't think it was. I think British Airways did extremely well with Concorde, bearing in mind that they acquired it from the British taxpayer at a knockdown price, whatever that may be. People have quoted a mythical £1 figure, but, you know, on that sort of basis, I believe that British Airways could hardly fail to make money with the airplane. In the years that I was on it, the break-even load factor was around 40%, and we used to get average load factors on the airplane of around 60%.
Okay, let's just keep you with these pictures here. And Raymond Baxter, did you actually get to fly? I mean, I know you were in Toulouse for the test flight. Did you fly Concorde?
Yes, I did. Thanks to my great friend Brian Trubshaw, the late Brian Trubshaw, and John Cochrane, who was co-pilot. I went on quite a few of the proving flights before passengers came aboard, and we did one of the early proving flights with passengers to Morocco. And everyone who was anyone in aviation was on that flight.
But explain to me this, why did no other airline buy Concorde? Why we've seen the British, oh, look at that shot now, we've got Concordes there sort of stacking up.
Oh my goodness, look at that. Oh, gracious. That's the kind of thing we never even saw at Farnborough. Yeah. I flew in Concorde over Farnborough, her one and only appearance there, with John Cochrane, and I'll never forget that. But to see two Concordes over Heathrow, I never, ever imagined I would see that. Did you, John?
No. It's a spectacular sight, isn't it? Stream landing, almost.
Yes, and so wonderful for the thousands of people who've gone to enormous lengths to see this. I know of a very distinguished elderly lady.
I don't know whether we can come to the studio camera here, but you can see it now coming into land behind us. Right behind where we're speaking to you from now. And there we are, Concorde is coming in behind us, the first of the Concordes to land. And you can hear the roar. And you can actually, as I look around, you know, I can see a number of people, and everyone is standing absolutely still. Everyone is just looking to the sky to watch this Concorde come down on the northerly runway. John, what sort of speed is it doing now as it's coming into land?
He'll be doing roughly about 157 knots, something like that. And, oh, well, I think we'll say a little gust of wind caught him.
Was there a little bounce there, or was that my imagination?
No, it was a gust of wind.
You're being loyal. You're being loyal to your fellow fraternity of Concorde pilots.
Oh, dear. He won't be pleased.
He won't be pleased.
Remember, this aeroplane lands and takes off a great deal faster than your average jumbo.
And the reverse thrust that you must need to get to break it, is that, do you feel that jolting?
There are two things about the deceleration of Concorde on landing. The reverse thrust is extraordinarily effective, and the carbon fibre wheel brakes, which have pioneered the wheel brakes for all the sort of modern Airbuses and so on, and all modern airplanes, are incredibly efficient in terms of absorbing energy. You can stop a Concorde. I've stopped one at Cardiff in about 4,000 feet of runway.
Yeah, and I mean, I can just see the next one coming in behind us now, which I suspect will be touching down in a couple of minutes' time. But you talk about that. We talk about the technological advances made by Concorde for Concorde, but presumably the technological advances had other spin-offs in other areas of life, and we've got another magnificent shot of one Concorde coming into land and another Concorde sort of stacking up behind it. There must have been other the technological advances, just like the moon landing, I don't know, gave us Teflon, for example. There must have been things associated with Concorde.
Oh, absolutely many. And not least the worldwide prestige which it won for British aviation, British engineering. And there is no doubt that the spin-off effect of Concorde almost immeasurable. For instance, Airbus would not have been formed had it not been for the cooperation between England and France in the construction of this aeroplane. Another thing we haven't mentioned, which is unique, is the thrust of power when Concorde accelerates from the cruising speed of a normal jumbo to supersonic speed, and you literally go back in your seat like that.
There she comes.
But this, of course, is absolutely the reverse process.
Lovely. She's such a gorgeous sight when she comes into land. She always reminds me of some swan touching down on a lake or something. It's such an elegant, long-necked, beautiful creature.
We haven't mentioned the drooped snoot, the famous drop nose, which makes it possible to take off and land this aeroplane, which has an attitude so different from any other airliner.
And the droop snoot, incidentally, is just so that the pilots can actually get a decent view of the runway. With the nose up, the poor old pilot coming into land would have his view of the runway totally obscured.
So it has to do it. In fact, I mean, I tell you what, I want to pause slightly now, because what we're seeing now is flight 002, and this is going to be the final Concorde that people are going to see coming into land at Heathrow Airport. This is it. This is the end of the era. This is the final one that we're going to see in the skies, and I suspect it's got probably a minute and a half left before it comes onto the runway and then taxis round. I think it will almost do a lap of honour round the airport to come onto the stand. John, just tell me what you're thinking now.
I was actually thinking about the staff at Kennedy Airport, the British Airways staff, who will miss it madly. They were fantastic to us. In fact, the whole of the Port of New York Authority and the air traffic controllers at Kennedy Airport were treated Concorde with tremendous help and assistance and cooperation.
Tell me this, being a pilot on Concorde, were you treated as somehow something different? A cut above the rest almost. I mean, or that maybe other pilots felt a little chippiness, because to fly that beautiful thing.
It wasn't us that were a cut above the rest. It was that aeroplane that was a cut above the rest. All we were the privileged pilots and flight engineers who were allowed to operate that aeroplane for all those years.
And did you feel that? Look, here it comes now.
I certainly did feel that.
And down she comes.
Settling down. Lovely.
Puff of smoke from the
Perfect.
wheels.
And then once that nose wheel touches down, that's when we put the reverse thrust and the carbon fibre brakes swing into action. Lovely sight. You can hear the reverse thrust coming through the studio. All
So what is it? Sadness, a feeling of pride, sadness? What is the mixture of emotions, John Hutchinson?
Sadness for me, predominantly. But pride that the aeroplane has achieved so much in its commercial life, and it's demonstrated that supersonic flight is doable and that there are huge benefits to supersonic flight, and I'm sure there will be a successor to Concorde at some stage.
I had the misfortune of being the BBC's Paris correspondent when Concorde crashed, and I went out to Gonesse that evening. And there was a feeling then that would Concorde ever fly again? Did you think it was right to make all the investment in the aircraft to bring it back for what has been a relatively short period of time?
I'll tell you what I do think, very strongly indeed. I don't believe that British Airways should ever have grounded their Concordes.
And you can see, I think we can see the Union flag poking out of the window there.
Yes.
As possibly the most famous nose in the world. And just look at the people behind, the ground crew. They've probably all got other things they're meant to be getting on with. But the whole airport, I suspect, at Heathrow has come to a halt for these three Concordes.
Just to go back very briefly to what you were saying, if you cast your mind back, you'll remember that after that dreadful event at Paris, British Airways carried on operating their Concordes for about 3 weeks with a whole lot of very tight checks and procedures agreed with the Civil Aviation Authority. And it was eventually, I'm afraid, pressure mainly from France that it ended up with the grounding of the airplane, which I believe was completely unjustified and slurred the reputation of a magnificent airplane.
Now, how much do you think that you've touched on something, and this is a day of kind of, let's talk about the reality of today as well. There has been something of a battle, hasn't there, between the French and the British over whether to keep Concorde going?
Yes, I think that's fair to say that. And I think part of it stems from the fact that there's much more in the way of business links between London and New York than there are between Paris and New York. So British Airways had a sort of commercial advantage over the French